for me, I break down authenticity into attachment, atonement, attunement, presence, and congruence, and we're going to try and go through them right now. So attachment theory, a lot of you know. Lacan wrote Le Stade du Miroir in 1934. And I think it was published after a conference, I think in 39. So when you hold a baby up to a mirror, its eyes are like Stevie Wonder. Why is that?
It doesn't know that it's self, that it has a self.
It has no self, right? And this is fascinating to me. This is what I've been studying recently, like the comprehensiveness. You know, like if I hold Hélène, my cat, up to the mirror, it's like she doesn't know, like, oh, those are my eyes. Like, it's very interesting, this concept. And then Lacan has this whole other theory about the mother standing behind the child. And then that, the gaze of the mother is what actually, like, the child can see that mother is a whole person. And then eventually, after 6 to 18 months, it says, like, okay, I'm a whole person, even though I can't see my back, I can't see these things. Like, that's why the mirror is so important. So, this early 60s, John Bowlby in the United Kingdom started this thing about attachment theory when he noticed that babies got distressed when their mothers were absent. Go figure. Right? Because babies are going to die. They know that. That's the one thing they know if they're not taken care of, right? They just need 4 things, and if they don't get them, they perish. So they cry until the parents can sort out which one of the 4 things they need. And then in 1969, Mary Ainsworth did these experiments called the Strange Situation, where a mother and a baby went into a room, and then the mother left, and the baby did one of a couple of things, which I'll describe in a second, and then the mother came back in, and what was observed is how the baby reattached to the mother. And this has implications as to how we attach as adults. So we'll just go through them briefly. The first one is secure attachment. If your parents were a loving presence in your life, and I'm joking in my head right now because the punchline is I was born in 1966, and my parents they went to the Nietzschean school of child rearing, which was what doesn't kill it makes it stronger, like let it cry itself out, right? And now we have this. If you go to the Palisades, this is funny now. You have the opposite now, where you have parents enabling the kids, like, so that they think the sun shines out their ass. So now we have like this, you know, as I write in the book that parenting styles come in ebbs and flows, right? So my parents were very concerned with the second Hitler coming, right? So they were like, you must be a doctor, you must be a lawyer, like just because, and for some reason that was the rationale, right? And again, there's a whole chapter in the book. Our parents did the best they could with the tools they had at the time. So there's no blame here. I'm just making an observation, right? So I don't think that Mary Ainsworth calculated that there was 33% of people had secure attachment, but I think that it's much, much lower in our society. And if you've ever swiped left on a dating app, maybe 200 or 300 times, or you were swiped left, you know, there might be a correlation between that. Okay, so the second type of reattachment is called avoidant or indifferent. And so the mother left the room, the baby cried, and when the mother came back in, the baby was like this. Well, fuck you. You left and it hurt, and if I reattach, it's just going to happen again. So I'll just avoid. And again, to me, this is endemic in our culture because of that let the baby cry itself out attitude of Dr. Spock in the 1960s. We have these people who are, I'm going to say, like hyper-regulated, like overly regulated. Like we're able, did I just say that? Was that Freudian stuff? But firstly, the normal bandwidth of emotions in America is extremely small. And in particular, I'm going to just do something I shouldn't do and talk about gender roles and say we don't really like sad men or we don't like angry women, just in general, right? And if you think about why, it's because these heightened emotions preclude us from doing our job. So again, this is a function of capitalism. You know, it's where our emotions are constrained because we have to go to work and be productive members of society. So again, avoidant. These people become indifferent because they don't want to have to go through that pain again. And then the third type is anxious preoccupied, which is just flip-flopping back and forth, like having one foot out the door. And then the last time, it's very interesting to me, it's called disorganized attachment. It was actually added after the experiments in 1969. But I think that this correlates, I think that there should be a study done, if there hasn't been already, between disorganized attachment and borderline personality disorder. Because if you know anyone who suffers from borderline personality disorder, they don't regulate very well, right? And so the typical borderline situation is you'll say, hey, I got to cancel lunch tomorrow. And they say, fine, I'll just go kill myself. And you're like, what the fuck? Like, we'll have it another day, right? But they just overreact. And if you look at disorganized babies, they're kind of like, they just don't know, like, should I attach? Should I not attach? Should I love bomb? Will that save me from mommy going away again? So again, I think that there should be a study done between people who are diagnosed with like some kind of disorganized attachment in the end, and then borderline personality disorder. We can have questions afterwards. Thank you. So you can take a look at a couple of these charts that I have and just get a sense of how securely you attach to other people. And then the reason this is so interesting to me is because this constitutes part of what we were talking about before, your subconscious, your paradigm, your perspective. And I love this quote, to choose doubt as a philosophy of life is akin to choosing immobility as a means of transportation. So again, we've assimilated all of these things, and that's what's interesting to me, how they manifest today. So in the Art Institute in Chicago, there's a painting when you walk down the hall, and it has this Einstein quote on it. There are only two ways to live your life. You can either live as though nothing is a miracle, or you can live as though everything is a miracle. And again, so here's the reason that this is important. So there's a book called Marriage as a Path to Wholeness by Harville Hendricks, and he says that the subconscious purpose of marriage in America is to enable us to complete our childhoods. Our parents had deficits, those deficits wounded us, those wounds became defense mechanisms, and those defense mechanisms became our personalities. And we'll always be attracted to people who can replicate the dynamics from one or more of our primary caregivers. And then Marianne Williamson adds, if they can't replicate them, we'll train them to. So for me, there's a wounded child in all of us that wants to be loved unconditionally, and then when you get into a fight with your loved one because of them asking you to change the sheets or whatever, and you become dysregulated, you lose your regulation, and you assassinate their character, or you say things, you always do this, you never do this, things like that, right? It's very interesting, because if you knew your attachment dynamic and the way you related to your primary caregivers when you were 3 and 5, then it might inspire you to take a deep breath and not, become that wounded child when you're having a conflict, supposedly, with your partner. And then Alice Miller wrote a drama, The Gifted Child, and for people, again, of my generation, she says that we were objectified by our parents. So we were essentially appendages, right? And like our mothers would say things like, you're making me look bad. So essentially, we weren't allowed to have our own emotional experience. I don't know if that relates to anyone in here, but the original title, who knows the original title of the drama, The Gifted Child? It's something like How to Deal with a Narcissistic Mother. And then they thought that wouldn't be a big seller in 1972, and they're probably right. But until Christopher Lasch's book, which was 1979, The Culture of Narcissism. Again, just wanting you to try on some things that might be in your blind spots and take a look at, do you just trust people, or, sometimes when I teach this in a larger venue, I'll say there'll be people from Montana or South Dakota, and I'll say, raise your hand if your front door is unlocked right now. And just think of your password manager and the locks on your door. And I mean, I grew up in New York City in the 70s. So you go into someone's apartment and they'd have 3 different bolt locks, right? And then there was that thing where it's like this iron rod that goes like this and it's in the floor. It's at that perfect angle. So even if on the 4th floor, if your door was hit by a train, it would stop it. And then there was a baseball bat in the other corner. And then in the nightstand was a gun. And so what I'm asking you is, what is your normal level of fear? Do you have any insight into what you do to not get robbed or to, I see this all the time. I'll sit down in a cafe and a woman will move her bag over, just an inch like this. And it's totally subconscious, right? And I'm just man, who do I look like? Really? Just notice these things. Okay, so that's attachment. And now this is at-one-ment or atonement. So this is a painting on the 3rd floor of the Met in New York. It's by Barnett Newman, and it's called one-ment, which is not a word. And if you put at in front of it, it becomes atonement. And I'm going to give you this new definition to realize your inner wholeness. So the tool we're going to use for this is forgiveness. And again, there's a whole book about this, how to release your resentments. So there's a beautiful quote by Suzuki Roshi who says, "You're perfect, and there's room for improvement." So for me, it's very interesting. When I teach this course in the longer version, again, I'm interested in consciousness, and I think that the dialectic in our culture, and it's kind of transitioning out. When we have this culture, if you look at narrative theory, it's all based on conflict. And you have the thesis, the antithesis, and it equals a synthesis. And that is our understanding of how we get to truth. So in my house, when I was growing up, I would say, look, the sky's blue. And then someone would be like, yeah, but it's going to rain tomorrow. So notice the way you respond to things, because I think we're all primed to be searching for truth. So do we normally look to say the opposite in some ways? It's fascinating to me because there are ramifications of this, right? I mean, if you're always doing that, you're going to come off as hypercritical, and the person's going to be like, I'm just going to shut up because, this person just jettisons, gainsays everything I say. Okay. The reason I went into that was because, and Kierkegaard wrote a book on this called Either Or. I think that's a foible of human consciousness. So you're perfect and there's room for improvement. Again, if you know the rabbit duck image, which I didn't bring in today, your mind can't hold these opposite thoughts at the same time. So it's like one or the other, or it flickers. So you're perfect and there's room for improvement. It's a very interesting concept. So if we were going to go through some meditations, what I would say is we do an observing your thoughts meditation, and then I would ask you what part of you was observing your thoughts, right? And some people point here, some people point here, but the point is that you are not your thoughts. And the way you think in this dialectical manner, everything is in two, like you think of everything's its opposite, like black, white, tall, short, things like that. I think it's a real problem. I think it's a problem, and it's caused a lot of wars and conflict in our culture that are unnecessary. Okay, so your mind was built because of the traumas of just normal life. It was built to create woulda, coulda, shoulda, didn't, grievance stories, right? And your mind thinks these things, shouldn't have happened. So I love this quote by Eckhart Tolle, who says, you either accept your life or change it. Any other position is insane. So if you complain about something, if you said, I would have been better if my parents didn't get divorced, or if I had gone to this other school, or blah, blah, blah. If you think about it, it's not really rational. It's like in my book, it's chapter 8, it's called Trying to Shove a Square Peg into a Round Hole. So the way we clean up our past so that we can show up authentically for the present moment is through forgiveness. And I'll give you a new definition of forgiveness. It's not condoning someone else's behavior. It's releasing your right to resent that something happened. So, ressentiment en français, is again, sentiment, sentiment. So you're re-feeling things from 20, 30 years ago. So do me a favor, everyone raise your hands like this. On the count of 3, I'd like you to clap last Thursday. 1, 2, clap last Thursday. Clap last year. Okay, so you can't change the past. What good does it do complaining about it? And yet, that's what your mind was built to do. Create grievance stories about the past. So, whatever happened in the past happened, and the only thing that exists today is your story about that. And the problem is that when we create these stories, they add judgments. And this is where the Buddha was so specific about the distinction between discernment and judgment. Discernment is look both ways before you cross the road. Judgment is our cars are bad, right? And that's the way you tell the story, right? Influences how other people are enrolled in your narrative, because you're adding this thing that you actually don't mean to add. This shouldn't have happened. So I was at the Compassion Conference in Seattle in 2008, and someone asked His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who's your greatest teacher? And so the obvious answer is the Buddha, right? Because he's the foremost spokesperson of Buddhism. So what does His Holiness say when asked, who's your greatest teacher? He says, the Chinese, who beat to death 2 million of his people with hatchet handles and hammers and just the most god-awful things since the Holocaust. That's his greatest teacher. So it's interesting to me because, if you're getting divorced from someone, you normally don't look at them and say, well, thank you for being my greatest teacher. But, in 30 or 40 years, you could say that, that is the case. The problem is that our stories that we create with these judgments keep us hooked into the past. And so anytime you hear that should or should not, that's a resentment, a ressentiment. So everyone from the 12-step program knows this phrase. Resentment is like poking yourself in the eye and waiting for the other person to go blind. Resentment is like drinking poison and waiting for someone else to get sick, right? You're only hurting yourself. And that's why I teach these classes on forgiveness. Cleaning up the past so that you can show up authentically in the present moment. And then when Rosencrantz and Guildenstern come up to Hamlet in Act 5, Scene 2, Act 5, they're trying to trick him into this thing. And he says, there's nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so. There's nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Nietzsche says, there's no such thing as a moral phenomenon. There are only moral interpretation of phenomena. So good or bad doesn't exist out there. It's our understanding of these things. But this is, again, put most beautifully by Miles Davis. It is what it is. So forgiveness is the ability to accept a no. It's the ability to accept this happened. My previous cat did die. Things happen. And you want to figure out a way to release your mind, creating the woulda, coulda, shoulda, didn't, the resentment, that because you're adding this judgment this shouldn't have happened, and basically, I'd be happy now, and I wouldn't have to take these antidepressants if that shit didn't happen. Forgiveness means giving up all hope of having a better past. There's a beautiful quote, I can't get it right now. It's by Milan Kundera, and he says, the only reason we're interested in creating a better future is in order to create a better past. Again, we become what we love and we become what we hate, and both are inauthentic. Like, it's interesting, just check in with yourself tonight. See, like, are you successful in some particular arena, like out of spite? Like, what's your motivating factor? Again, who is the author of your desires? It's not one thing. I'm not proselytizing. I'm just trying to raise consciousness so that you have some new thoughts and are able to, hopefully, in trying situations, think better thoughts. Okay, unforgiveness, if you're not willing to forgive, is your desire to share your suffering. So I had my face blown off my head when I was 18 years old in a car accident. My femur shattered, and for 25 years after that, I walked around and people come up to me in the bar and say, "How'd you get that scar on your face?" And I would say, "I was almost killed in a car accident." And it worked quite well for 25 years. And then I took a class like this, and you had to recount the story of your life, and then someone else basically deconstructed it. So I was there with this guy, and I said, "I was almost killed in a car accident." He goes, "No, you weren't." And I was like, my face was blown off my head. They called in someone to amputate my leg. They didn't notify my parents. Trust me, I was almost killed in a car accident. He said, "No, you weren't." No. There was a car accident. Everything else you added. Language creates reality. The way you choose to tell your story about your life enrolls other people, and then you are that person. So again, we have to figure out new ways to express ourselves. And I'm going to give you a couple in a minute, because it's this way of being that we suck everybody into our drama, and we're subconsciously making ourselves victims or heroes just by the way we choose our addiction. This is a bumper sticker. It's a bumper sticker because it's cliche, and cliches are cliches because they're true. Pain is unavoidable. Suffering is optional. Pain is unavoidable in life. So pain does not cause suffering. It's our intolerance of pain that causes suffering. Pain is immediate, right? If I'm in pain, my arm's broken, it's like, stop thinking about dinner, stop thinking about your next vacation destination. Like, you need to get to the hospital and set this arm, right? That's what pain is. But again, years later, we're suffering because of things that happened. Clap last Thursday. You can't change the past, but you're causing your own suffering. So the way to clean this up, I mean, if someone has a better way, that'd be fantastic. But from what I've learned, it's through forgiveness. And again, if you're not willing to forgive somebody, it just means you're not done suffering. So we have a very serious problem in our culture with grief. I believe in the DSM-4, I haven't looked at this in some time, but they conflate. So if you go in, there's 9 symptoms of depression. And the physician, doctor, psychiatrist is supposed to also ask if there's been a death, like in the family, in the last 2 weeks. And for the DSM-5, that was called the bereavement exemption. I got it. Bereavement, here I'm going to hurt myself, pat myself on the back. Bereavement exemption. And in the DSM-5, that was eliminated, and the rationale was because they found that the same medication that worked on depression also worked on bereavement. Now think about that. You call your boss up and say, my son was hit by a car and killed. And she says, it's really awful, you should take 2 weeks off work. That's the culture you live in, right? That's capitalism. You get 2 weeks off if something tragic and traumatic happens. Again, so Foucault talks about systems of thought, right? So who are the authors of, who's the author of your desires? Why do you think the things that you think? And we need to look at these systems, and that's what I do in the first book, like the myth of romantic love. So if you read Denis de Rougemont, 1949, L'amour et l'Occident, Love in the Western World, he says that romantic love is esoteric to Western civilization. It's about 750 years old. It's based on the myth of Tristan and Isolde. And this whole thing about like us feeling unwhole, and there's a missing part of us out there. And when we find our soulmate, we'll feel whole, like Tom Cruise and Renee Zellweger in the elevator when he says, "You complete me." Like, what does that mean? Well, it means you're fucked because she's not always going to be there. So the Buddha taught skillful means, and we were given, again, without any blame, just as an observation, through the systems of thought in the 60s and 70s, we learned these unskillful solutions. And the reason I'm raising consciousness around these things today is because we have to be the ones that say it stops with us. I mean, I'll just go into an extreme example, the Palestinian-Israeli situation. Our understanding of justice comes from the Code of Hammurabi, which means that I feel terrible, and the only way I know that justice is served is to know that you feel as terrible as I feel. So, your son killed my son in a terrorist attack, so that means that I have to kill your son. That's what that's the logic behind the death penalty. And, what is that? What's the Mahatma Gandhi, everyone knows this, an eye for an eye, Code of Hammurabi, an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind, So we don't have, our system of justice is actually a system of revenge, and somebody has to admit that. And that's one of the faults of our society, right? Because we enjoy revenge. We just have to admit it, and then we have to figure out, is this advancing us as a culture, or some of the Buddhists, maybe we should time to say my religion is compassion. And, maybe some brave Israeli and Palestinian mother will just say, it stops with me. I will break this chain of unskillful solutions. So again, if we're doing this class in a longer format, I would ask you to meditate on any grudges that you hold. Who would you need to forgive, to release those machinations in your head, those ruminations, I'd be happy now if this didn't happen or that didn't happen, It happened, right? Clap last Thursday. You can't change the past. What good does it do complaining about it, Okay, attachment, attunement, presence, and congruence. Attunement, very quickly. I'm not gonna actually go through this because I'd like to end at 3 o'clock. So, multitasking. A lot of times, unintentionally, when we're interacting with other human beings, us, invalidate the other person's emotional experience. So in my book, I write, mirror neurons do not fire via text message. Mirror neurons do not fire via text message. So in 2007, after I graduated with my psychology degree, I moved to Austin, Texas by mistake. And I had a supervisor there, and we were talking one day, and he said, shit, I can turn anyone off the street into a psychotherapist in 5 minutes. And he went like this. It sounds really difficult. That sounds really challenging. So the reason I wrote mirror neurons do not fire via text message is because we need facial affect. We need that the other person is holding space for us. And that's what psychotherapy does. Because in a lot of our interactions, I have a couple of, maybe one or two pet peeves, but like earbuds, or sunglasses. Like if someone comes up to me on the street and they don't remove the sunglasses, I'll just walk away. I'll be like, fuck you. It's horrible, like the eyes are the windows to the soul. You have to be able to see someone's eyes. And the earbud thing it's a horrifying phenomenon. Like when people are coming up to you, or you see couples walking down the street and they're both wearing earbuds and they're looking at their devices. Like you wonder why we have this epidemic of depression, because we're not connecting. We don't know how to attune to other people. So again, I teach these classes on how to attune so that you can make your partner feel heard. And then when guys are in my office, they're like, yeah, I know how to listen. I'm like, yeah, you're fucked. Listening is completely distinct from making someone feel heard. Right? So I would advise all of you in couples to learn this skill and to put down your device and be able to sit there with your partner for, God forbid, 10 minutes. And have your facial affect mirror, and listen, I defer to much smarter people. Chris Voss's masterclass, and Delta just sent me this coupon for 15% off, so you can go to there and get it. Chris Voss's masterclass. This is a really tough crowd. Chris Voss's masterclass, masterclass.com. It talks about mirroring and matching, which is again from NLP, and the point is you have to have the mirror neurons firing, both of you, with eye contact, with facial affect. And this is why that chat bots and all that text message therapy, it's all bullshit. None of that stuff works. I don't even think Zoom works, because I think there are so many pheromones and so many things. I'm totally not joking. We need body language. I need to see that your foot's shaking. I need to see your spine. And if we did this exercise now, I would trick you. I'm not going to do it for the sake of time, but I would have the two people, and I would have them turn to each other and say, tell the other person that you see 87 purple Martians dancing la cucaracha on her head. And she would say, I see, so if I hear you correctly, I see 87 purple Martians dancing la cucaracha on my head. And then I would say, why did I do that? Because this is about the process, not about the content. There's a study done at UCLA in the 70s where 93% of all communication is nonverbal. Text messaging is the equivalent of smoke signals, right? Most of them are read wrong. I've seen more people break up by text messaging. The only reason text messaging should be used is for an emergency or to schedule a phone call or meeting. And I have kids in my office all the time, and they have full-on conversations, and they usually end up breaking up. So just use the rule, and then my rule is don't ever text anything that you wouldn't want to hear read aloud in court. I think that's a good barometer, right? Seriously, because I have to do this, and that's the weird thing. When someone will say in our society, oh, I read this book last week, and and they didn't actually read it, they listened to it. And then oh yeah, we were talking, and then she said this, and then I said this, and then she said this. And it's you weren't talking, were you? You were texting. Right? We conflate these things, but they're completely separate, and you need to be able to, choose your words precisely. Okay, so attuning, the first tool is reflective listening. And then the second tool that I use is nonviolent communications. And the reason is this, because if you stab me right here, every muscle in my body would go like this. And if you stab me right here with the same force, the knife would bounce off. And that's what your mind does. If you open with a negative, oh, those shoes are terrible. The person will not hear the rest of it. You need to always open with positive. And I mean, if you read Gottman's books, it should be 5 positives, right? If you want to offer criticism. But you again, we need to make people feel heard, and then we need to be able to communicate our own grievances in a way that enrolls people in being vulnerable. So if I say, be vulnerable, like you're not going to be vulnerable. So Marshall Rosenberg found this excellent way. Again, it's through I statements. So and this is funny if you're our age, Mad Libs. We all played when we were kids. Do people remember that?
Yeah.
It's funny, right? So I feel, and then a feeling state when, and this is an observation, not when you do this, but an observation, because I need, and then you own your emotional need, and then you make a request. In the future, could you please? So I feel disrespected when my text messages go unanswered because I need to feel that we're a team. In the future, could you please return my text messages in a timely manner? So again, I'm not saying, you bastard, you never return my text messages. No, like, because immediately that person, they're gonna constrict and become defensive. So again, you can't tell someone to be vulnerable, but you can inspire them, right? By modeling it for them. Got it? You model being vulnerable, and then hopefully you inspire them to do that. Okay. There's a lot of press recently about a longitudinal Harvard study, and they found that the only thing that correlates strongly with happiness is the quality of your intimate relationships, which is interesting because, like, if we have this culture where insecure attachment is endemic, like, how do we lean into these things and create these wonderful relationships? Personally, I think that dinner, breaking bread, is like the most important thing in the world. And when I see people like eating at their desk or eating in their car, I'm just like, oh man. Like, we really need to sit there and have long meals and nod and talk about interesting things and grow with each other, right? Well, you have to, I mean, in The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle says, the only reason you should be in a relationship is because you want to learn, right? And so come to the table with a sense of wonder and curiosity. And there was a study that came out last week that they used the word awe, but there's a beautiful book about astonishment, and it's on Wittgenstein and Lacan, and their understandings of astonishment. Like, what is astonishment? So now I'll go right back to the beginning of this talk, and I will recount an anecdote, and that'll help you understand how I think jokes work. So, J.L. Austin is teaching a semantics class at Columbia University in 1952, and he said, the sky is blue is a positive statement. The sky is not blue is a negative statement. If I say, I cannot resist the chocolate, those are two negatives that make a positive. But in no language in the history of humanity do two positives make a negative. And Morgan Besson-Schmisser in the back of the room said, yeah. So for me, the way jokes work is that there's a setup, like he's as dumb as A, right? And then your mind has this circle, and you have about 50 things in it: stone, fish, whatever. And if I say any of those things at the punchline, it's not funny. And then there's this infinite array of absurd things, and if I say any of those things, it's not funny. So this, what we like, my cat doesn't laugh. So down to the yours. So what's interesting about humor, and then Freud wrote jokes in the relation to the unconscious, and then Lacan's fifth seminar on the formation of the unconscious, it revolves around jokes, again, because that's, I believe, an entryway into finding out how your mind really works. So there's this circle of things, and what laughter is to me is it's like this nervous energy that you're expelling from your body, and what you're really saying is, oh, I should have thought of that, but you didn't. So again, if you did think of it, it's not funny. If it's absurd, it's not funny. But again, yeah. So does anyone want to leave, or can I tell what I think is the funniest joke ever?
No, tell us.
Okay, this is the funniest joke, I think, and then we'll discuss it afterwards. So the CIA is auditioning for the top hit person in the world. And there's 3 contestants, and they've gone through all the stuff until they get to the last thing. And so for the final test, the first guy comes up, and the CIA guy says, okay, for your final assignment, I'd like you to take this gun and go into that restaurant. In the corner, in a booth, is your wife. You have to blow her brains out and come back outside. Takes the gun, goes inside, silence. Comes outside, puts the gun down, and says, couldn't do it. Second guy comes up, and they say, okay, so for your final assignment, you have to take this gun, you have to go into that restaurant. In the corner is your wife in a booth. You have to blow her brains out and come outside. He says, okay. Takes the gun, goes inside, silence, comes back out, puts the gun down. Third contestant is a woman. They say, okay, for your final assignment, you have to go into that restaurant. In the corner is your husband in a booth. You have to blow his brains out and come outside. She says, okay. She takes the gun. She goes through the restaurant. There's silence, right? And then inside the restaurant, the guy hears that there's a bit of a ruckus. And finally, the woman comes outside. She puts the gun down. She goes, you fucking idiot. You gave me a gun full of blanks. I had to kill him with a chair. Now, again, what is in your subconscious that joke is not funny with 2 midgets and an Eskimo? That joke is not funny with 2 Puerto Ricans and a Jew. Fucking idiot, you gave me a gun full of blanks. I had to kill him with a chair. I think that is good. It's awful. It's horrible. I didn't tell that joke on camera. Okay, so presence for me, the tool is just meditation. So on my first DVD, and I think in one of the books, depression relates to thoughts about Depression relates to thoughts about the past. Anxiety relates to thoughts about the future. The past no longer exists. It's dead and gone. The future doesn't yet exist. So how can depression and anxiety exist? So you have the ability to make yourself present. I have this whole array. It is chapter 1 of Wired and Tired that I was thinking we might get through. But there are tools so that you can come back into the present moment. The 3-part breath is, to me, the best because our normal inhalations are 4 seconds and exhalations are 5 seconds. And so what I teach is to double that in order to take us out of fight or flight mode. Again, and that's why I talk about fear and like how many different passwords you have and things like that. Like the stuff that we consider to be normal, wrapping this around to the first slide, right, is really, we're in fight or flight mode most of our lives.
Yeah.
You know, and you wonder why you have like burnt adrenals or you're wired and tired or you can't sleep, things like that. Okay, so just to finish up, Alice Walker, we are the ones we've been waiting for. You know, the world is in dire straits right now. I think we're on the brink of the civil war. I use that Marshall McLuhan quote, I don't know who discovered water, but I doubt it was a fish, because what's happening around us, I think, is the implosion of capitalism, right? Our country is whatever trillions of dollars in debt. We're all the beneficiaries through mortgages, credit cards and student loans. Those are all bubbles, right? We just happen to be the strongest country in the world, which is why people invest in us and we have a strong dollar. But really, it's a house of cards, and we should expect the unexpected. So if our one of the systems of thought that influences the way we think is money, like what's going to happen when the stock market goes to zero on Tuesday, if it did, you know, or if the dollar, you know, something terrible happens, you know, we don't know. We don't know about the war in the Ukraine. We don't know about nuclear weapons, things like that. So again, we are the ones we have been waiting for. We cannot kick the can down the road any further with climate change, with all the terrible things that are happening. You know, we have to be the instruments of change. We have to be the change that we want to see in the world. So I usually try to end these talks with something extremely provocative. I ask people, like, what are you going to leave here with? You know, there's only two things you can leave here with. You can either leave here with results or you can leave here with excuses. Change is difficult, you know? And so, again, what I'm trying to inspire you to do is look into all the things that you consider to be normal, your way of responding to other people, you know, your way of, so I'll just give you some examples. You know, the mind has a negativity bias, that's one thing. And also you're more apt to answer no. So you can be tricked all the time like this. Like if I call you up and say like, hey, do you want to buy a car? No. But if I call you up and I say, did I catch you at a bad time? And you say no, that means you're free to talk. Right? Or police officers know these language tricks. So if they come to your car and they say, may I search the trunk? You obviously say no. You're primed to say no. But if they say, do you mind if I look in the trunk? You say no, and that gives them permission because you say, I don't mind. You can be tricked all these, we saw this before. Like language creates reality, and the way you express yourself and the way you enroll other people in conversations, you know, definitely has proclivities in terms of getting the responses that you desire. And if that doesn't inspire you, maybe this will. Proclivities in terms of getting the responses that you desire. And if that doesn't inspire you, maybe this will. Proclivities in terms of getting the responses that you desire. And if that doesn't inspire you, maybe this will. Last day on earth, the person you became will meet the person you could have become.
Wow.
So these are some of the things that I talk about in the first book, How to Survive Your Childhood, now that you're an adult. And now the new book, Wired and Tired. I have this whole list of like tools and things, but I feel like I've covered enough ground, so I'll end there.